right, hello everyone, and welcome to Politically Unhinged. As always, I am your host, Anthony Rader. Today, I have a good friend of mine named Political Education. He has been in the political atmosphere for far longer than I have, and he's going to be talking to us about Trump's pathway to victory in the battleground states. All right, Political Education. Thank you so much for coming on. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Happy to be here.
That's great. So, you're in the state of Georgia. How is it looking over there?
I would say things are looking fairly positive here in Georgia. We have had record voter turnout this year in Georgia. Even on the first day of voting, we didn't just break, we absolutely shattered our record for the amount of early votes in a single day with over 300,000 people voting on October 15th. Most of those being from deep red rural Republican counties. So we are seeing a massive movement and a lot of energy for this election here in Georgia.
All right. Yeah. So, my question to you is do you think those are voters that are typically would vote on election day, or are these just our low proximity voters finally coming out to vote for Trump?
So the overwhelming majority of these voters are voters that would typically vote on election day. Our Republican Party and the Trump campaign have actually done an excellent job of not just now, but even within the past year, communicating with voters the need to just go ahead and bank their vote and get out and vote early and get that done.
So, with this situation that we're in right now, I know early voting's looking great for Trump. Do you think we're going to see like the similar turnout that we did in 2016 for election day for him?
I think we're going to see similar turnout for him. One thing that I am noticing because I'm keeping track of the early voting data, particularly here in Georgia, is that the blue counties, Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Gwinnett, Douglas, Clayton, they are all seeing less voter turnout. Like there's not very much excitement it seems coming from those areas, particularly in the deep blue areas, to get out and vote. And Democrats are usually the ones that take early voting. They prefer convenience voting versus actually voting on a singular day. So it's creating an interesting paradigm shift in Georgia with voting because we're seeing so many of these typically election day voters show up and vote early in droves. I mean, we've already had 2.7 million at least show up and vote, which is about 40-ish% of our registered voters here in Georgia. And it is absolutely phenomenal the energy that we've got.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. So, what in your state, you've been saying that a lot of people are turning out. So, how do you think this is going to affect the House races in your state?
Well, luckily after we redistricted, we had to redistrict again because the Biden Department of Justice decided to target Georgia, and Democrat activists went shopping for a judge, and we had to not just draw our lines once, but we had to redraw them twice. So there's really only one congressional race in Georgia that's really up for grabs. And the Cook Report is really giving that to the Democrat that's the current incumbent there, Sanford Bishop. That's Georgia's second congressional district. But everything for the most part, other than that, is going to remain the same. And down in the second district, it's just going to determine who shows up. The main city down in the second is Albany, Georgia, and we're not seeing the type of enthusiasm and turnout down in Albany, which is a deep blue area that we usually would in a presidential election cycle. So there's a possibility, even though is a D+3 district, that Wayne Johnson, the Republican nominee, may actually kick Sanford Bishop out, and that would get rid of the last rural Democrat congressional seat in the South.
Oh, wow. But so, do you think that there's going to be a lot more turnout in Georgia for you guys over there? You're not going to be seeing that many Democrats, but more low proximity voters for Trump.
So I know that the Trump campaign has really been targeting low propensity voters. I actually was live on TikTok the other night, and I had a gentleman that used to work for the DSCC come in my live, and we were talking just amicably about how strategy was going, and it's it's a little bit interesting because typically at this point in time, you would have an all hands on deck field operation, like knocking on as many doors as possible, getting people out to vote. And the Trump campaign is still specifically just targeting low propensity voters to get them out to vote versus your typical voter. So we're seeing an interesting experiment in campaign strategy because if Trump wins on election day, we're probably going to see more campaigns start to use this targeting only low propensity voters as a strategy. But if he ends up losing, then people are just going to shove this sort of back to the side and say, okay, it doesn't work. Um, so that's really where we're at as far as that's concerned right now.
Yeah. So I also want to talk to you about the state of the race. What people are saying is the most important state right now. That is Pennsylvania. Uh, so in Pennsylvania, uh, Trumpet is up marginally in the polls right now. He's up in the markets. It's you travel the entire country for a living for politics. Uh, what is the data you're seeing there?
So everything I'm seeing there is a little bit contradictory. And I will agree that Pennsylvania is the most important state in the country right now. Whoever wins Pennsylvania will end up becoming the next president of the United States. Um, but what we're seeing is the Democrats are turning out in larger numbers to early vote in Pennsylvania than they are in most other states. And Republicans, for some reason, in Pennsylvania, just aren't turning out, even though Trump is up in the polls. So what we're seeing is we've got this enthusiasm for Trump in polling, but it's not manifesting at the ballot box just yet. Now, I'm hoping that means there's going to be a large number of people that vote in Pennsylvania on election day, but I I'm not seeing it just yet. It's making me nervous, just to be completely frank with you. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the people up in Pennsylvania, start to get their act together in these last few days and go out and vote when they have the chance versus waiting until election day and chancing that, anything comes up, flat tire, bad weather or whatever.
Yeah, I completely agree. If you guys are able to vote early, do that right now. Oh, political education and I are probably used to it already, considering running campaigns and being in political life for a while. Well, we have no guarantee that we are ever able to vote on election day, so vote early, y'all. It's the best way to do it. You can bank your vote right there. All right.
And I will
So,
say that I'm speaking from experience here,
yeah.
because there was a previous election day where my transmission went out in my car, and I had waited until election day, and I almost didn't get to vote. I had to, once I got everything with the car settled, I had to call someone and say, "Hey, need you to give me a ride ASAP." So don't don't leave anything to chance.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. So in the state of Pennsylvania, the Democrats like to say that they have a decent firewall right now. It's about 400,000 votes, but they are ignoring the fact that back in 2020, their firewall was about 2 million, I think it was. So with that being said, and I know we're not going to see a lot of voter turnout as we did in 2020, but do you think that firewall would possibly hold, or is Trump in a good state right now with them only having like about 400,000 votes up on him at most?
I would say he's in a pretty good position right now, but I'm going to tell you what I've told a whole lot of people previously. This race is going to be close. If you see a Republican say it's going to be a blowout, if you see a Democrat say it's going to be a blowout, um, they're they're delusional
Yeah,
because especially dealing with Pennsylvania, with their blue wall and everything else, we're looking at Pennsylvania is probably going to be decided by less than 100,000 votes. So will it hold? It remains to be seen. But again, I don't think we're seeing the same sort of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris that we've seen from Democrats in the past. And even in 2020, I don't even think it was enthusiasm for Joe Biden nearly as much as it was people just getting out and voting because they were bored and locked down.
yeah,
So I think that moving on from 2020 as an outlier year, we're going to start to see things sort of return to normal over the next few election cycles. But it remains to be seen if that blue wall is going to hold because there isn't as much enthusiasm for Kamala.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I've told people that it's possible for Trump to get over 300 electoral votes, but that would also be with very small margins of victory. Right. It is possible, but these margins of victory, like you said, they're going to be very small. We're talking possibly within a percentage point to like just barely a quarter a percentage point in these states. These states are very competitive. I mean, thankfully, Trump has gotten a lot of endorsements from all different types of groups, even those that you and I do not agree with whatsoever. So I think we can both agree that there are some endorsements that we would have rather not have right now in this election cycle. But thankfully, Trump is getting these endorsements and he's getting all these more, I guess you can say, moderate people out and endorsing him, former presidential candidates who just don't like Kamala Harris. I think that's going to help him out right there. But as you said, I mean, with Tulsi Gabbard, you, I think she's fine. I think she's fine. I think she's a good speaker. But just like you, her economic policy, whew, that's a
I understand what Trump's doing, and I understand he needs these folks to help him get votes. And I think that once he gets back in, there are going to have to be some very difficult decisions made as to who
yeah,
he's actually going to keep around. But going back a little bit to the closeness of the race, I mean, go back to Georgia in 2020. Joe Biden won Georgia by 11,792 votes. And shortly after the election, I did the math. If we had had three more votes for Trump in every precinct in Georgia, he would have won Georgia. The election in Georgia was that close. Three votes per precinct. And there were states that were even closer. And we're probably going to see these same margins. And I think that that illustrates the closeness a little bit better than, just talking about sheer numbers because it's kind of hard to break down what 11,000 people look like. But
yeah,
if you think of it as three votes per precinct, that's a lot easier to digest.
yeah. So, what I also want to talk to you about some House races that are deemed to be competitive right now. One of them is District 6 in Maryland. I'll be honest, I do not see the Republican winning that district. Uh, he has to overcome what I consider the finger in Maryland with Montgomery County, where you got Gaithersburg and Germantown. On the Now, Wagon itself, the Panhandle is very conservative, but with having that demographic right there in those big cities, he's not going to overcome it. As Republicans, do you think that there's going to be any time in the near future where we could see some cities get a little bit more red within the next few election cycles? I'm talking about 3 presidential cycles at minimum.
Unfortunately, no. I mean, even the most conservative large city in the country right now, Fort Worth, and another formerly large conservative city, Colorado Springs, we are seeing them trend more and more towards the left. And a big part of that is people moving from California. The California virus has stopped infecting just its neighbors. It's starting to infect the entire country. We're seeing the same thing with Nashville and Knoxville in Tennessee as more and more Californians move in. So as much as I wish that we would start to see some of these larger cities trend more towards the Republicans, I think it's going to be at least 20 years before we start to see some of these larger cities trend more red. And I will say, as far as Maryland's concerned, when redistricting was going on, I was keeping track of a lot of different states, but Maryland was one of those that I kept a little bit more track of because I watched how y'all's state legislature just gerrymandered that state
Oh,
all to heck, removed pretty much every swing district and every Republican district in an attempt to try and hold on to power.
yeah,
And we're going to see more and more of that from the Democrats. We saw it from them in California. We saw it in Illinois. We saw it in New York, and it's going to continue to be a problem because all the left cares about is power, and they're going to do anything and everything they can to hold on to it.
yeah. I completely agree. Now, there is a Senate race that people are talking about where the Democrats think they actually have a dog in the fight right now. People are saying that the race is going to be close against Ted Cruz, who's a personally, I don't see it. I think Ted Cruz is going to win anywhere between like 5 and 8 points. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, I've worked on several campaigns in Texas. I had the privilege of working on campaigns in Texas back in 2018 when Robert O'Rourke was running against Ted Cruz back then. And I can honestly tell you the attitude of even average Texans towards Ted Cruz, even with some of the more recent controversies, people are more willing to choose the devil that they know versus the devil that they don't know. And All Red just came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
Like the guy has no political career. He hasn't been involved in politics whatsoever. And he just thinks he's going to become a United States Senator. And so at the end of the day, when you have people that either don't pay attention to politics or they just show up at the polls and don't really think about it, they're going to vote for the incumbent. So Democrats have done a good job of trying to market Texas as state that's going to flip blue because of the sheer number of people that have moved there from California. And it's possible in the future, but Texas right now, it's getting closer, but Texas is going to stay red. And I think that's going to be a good thing both for Ted Cruz and for the United States.
yeah. So what I've noticed with Texas in the Rio Grande Valley, you're seeing a lot more Hispanics trend to the right. But granted, that is a trend that we are seeing everywhere in the country. We're seeing a lot more minorities go to the right, and quite frankly, yep. How should Republicans go ahead and capitalize on this?
Well, I was actually talking to someone about this last night. You've got Texas 34 and Texas 28, which are border districts. These used to be solid blue districts. And even with redistricting, these districts are starting to get very, very close. You're starting to really see Texas look like a lot of the rest of the South, where you only have pockets of blue around the big cities. And I think that that should be a wake up call for Democrats that their policies aren't nearly as popular as they think they are.
Yeah,
But as far as moving forward with Republican politics and minorities, I think that we're going to be able to continue to capitalize on this because so many people are waking up to the fact that the news media is propaganda. And when people go and independently research these topics on their own and the effects of policies, they're starting to realize that, hey, Democrat policies don't benefit me. They tie me to the government. They don't give me the ability to start my own business. They don't give me the ability to move up into the next tax bracket. They keep me trapped exactly where I'm at.
yeah,
And so I think by us continuing to talk about that, especially on the economic side, is actually going to help us a lot. And this was something that I was telling a lot of Republicans in college, it's good to have stances on a lot of the social issues out there, but where we really capitalize with all of these different groups that don't generally tend to vote conservative is going to be talking to people about where government affects them at their pocketbook.
yeah,
And we can talk about social issues when everyone's in the top tax bracket. But until we get the economy fixed, we've got to continue talking about these economic issues in order to get more and more people on board with Republicans being in government.
yeah. So I do have another question for you. All right, so as you know, abortion is somehow on the ballot right now in a federal election. I don't know why. They We know that they have been pressuring the Trump campaign to say like, "Hey, will you sign a tax ban? Will you sign an abortion ban?" Right. So how come Trump has not come out and just said, "Hey, this is no longer a federal issue. It belongs to the states. I should not be talking about this."
Well, I mean, Trump has come out and said it. He said it at the debates. They pressured him at the debates and said, "Will you sign a national abortion ban?" And he unequivocally said at the debates that if it hits his desk, that he will not sign it. That the whole purpose of getting Roe v. Wade overturned was to take this issue back to the states. Now, me, I am as anti-abortion as they come.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I understand that not everyone looks into this issue as deeply as I do. And that's the type of thing we need in order to really take the teeth out of this argument, is allowing the states to have that power. And Trump is continuing, I mean, he's published it on his website, he's published it on social media that he will not sign a national abortion ban. And the fact that they continue to bring this topic up after it's a settled topic, and even if Kamala Harris were to win the presidency, there is not a dang thing she can do to restore Roe v. Wade unless she also wins the House and gets 60 votes in the Senate.
Yeah.
So it's a pipe dream. It's an emotional tug that is meant to manipulate low information voters into voting for Kamala.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's honestly the insanity of our political system where we do. I mean, you and I both know. Voters typically have a thinking span of 2 weeks before an election, and the 2 weeks is the biggest part in it. So that's why they always talk about the October surprise in each election. And now, what I do want to talk to you about this. So, everyone's saying, yeah, as you know, Trump wins, we're going to go into World War III, but they always say, hey, Trump wins World War III, right? But we had no new wars under Donald Trump. But a matter of fact, I think we were actually in the most peaceful time in human history, y- with Donald Trump as president. Now, we are now having the left and some independents that are now skewing a little bit more towards the Democrat Party, saying that, hey, all these things were inevitable. Well, for instance, like Hamas attacking Israel on October 7th. And quite frankly, look, I think what Netanyahu should have done was just leveled out Gaza, personally.
I
But
mean, it wasn't inevitable. And
yeah,
that's the thing. America, ever since World War II, America has been able to be a peacekeeping force throughout the world, not by having American boots on the ground, but by being able to wield a big stick and saying, knock it off or we'll do X, Y, and Z.
yeah,
And when we put this spineless geriatric in the White House, people like Putin, people like Xi, people like the leaders of Hamas, people like Kim Jong Un all saw this as an opportunity of, oh, the United States has lost its strength.
yeah,
They're not going to do anything to me when Joe Biden's in there because he's a fragile old man that wants to negotiate his way to peace instead of wielding the power that he actually has. So I absolutely believe that if Trump had been president, Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine. We wouldn't have had thousands of lives lost there in that unnecessary war. Hamas would not have pulled its nonsense with Israel, and we wouldn't have seen all those innocent people die on October 7th and all the other innocent lives that are collateral damage that Hamas uses as human shields. We wouldn't see Iran uh, very ballsily sending missiles into Israel and trying to flex their military muscles in the Middle East. And this really, to me, lies squarely on the shoulders of Democrats for being cowards. I mean, there's no other word for it. I mean, they took the signal when we withdrew from Afghanistan, leaving billions in weapons and equipment behind that people could then sell to other countries or use for themselves. And they're like, oh, well, if they'll botch their withdrawal, they don't have the wherewithal to take care of us if we do X, Y, and Z. So
yeah.
it's created a situation where the world is less free. And we have to restore that strength to America in order to prevent wars moving forward and end the ones that are currently going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can both say first step to doing that, getting Donald Trump elected on November 5th.
Absolutely.
That's that's
He's got to
that's
be back in there.
yeah, yeah, and quite frankly, yeah. Now this is a topic that everyone has been talking about, but has flown under the radar in recent weeks and months. Uh, Could we see China go ahead and make a push for Taiwan on if Trump becomes the president elect within these few months where Joe Biden's still in power?
Realistically, if China wanted to make a push for Taiwan, they would have already done it. I think that they have been sort of flexing their muscles, but we need to realize that the Chinese military, and in particular the Chinese Navy, isn't as good as a lot of people make it out to seem. Their ships can only go so far. A lot of the ships in their navy are really just empty hulls with motors in them.
Yeah.
Like they do not have the type of military might, even though they have the sheer number of ships that they have is astonishing. But they cannot hold a candle to the technologically advanced force that the island of Taiwan has. And a lot of that, I will admit, has been provided by the United States. We've either given it or sold it to them. And it puts them in a pretty good position that if China even were to try something, they would be able to handle the most of the front end of that all on their own. But I don't see them making a push for that just yet. Though, I mean, I would be remiss if I did not just point out that the government of the Republic of China that sits on the island of Taiwan is the legitimate government of China. And I'm saying that just to make them mad.
It's a good thing we're not on TikTok right now.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad I can say it here.
Yeah. So uh, now there is more things I do want to ask you. To, now this is a big one. So we've been talking about the economy. That's the number one issue for the voters. All right, everyone's been realizing that their life was better under Trump. They had a lot more savings under Trump. So now we also have people bringing up the fact, hey, Trump was spending a lot more money than he was bringing in. And now, do you think with everything that's going on with Trump saying going ahead and getting that tariffs up more, or do you think that's going to help him bring in a lot more money into the federal government so we can possibly start paying off the national debt like he has been saying?
So, first and foremost, I do need to point out that a lot of the spending under Trump wasn't necessarily Trump.
Yeah,
We have to remember that the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives for the last 2 years of his term. And if you know Nancy Pelosi, she treats the U.S. Treasury like it's her own personal checkbook, and she's going on a spending spree on Fifth Avenue.
yeah,
So to put that solely on Trump's shoulders, and I know that this is something that the left likes to do, I think is more than a little bit disingenuous because the House is what controls the purse strings of government. But as far as the tariffs go, it does have the potential to raise some of the revenue that's needed. But what would really fix it won't fix it because at this point our national debt's become untenable. There's no way we're paying off almost $36 trillion in debt within any of our lifetimes. We would have to put in place some serious austerity measures in order to get that paid off within the next 100 years. But what we're going to see with the tariffs, if they're implemented correctly, we will absolutely start to see a lot of that revenue going into the federal government, and that will actually allow Donald Trump and hopefully Republicans who control the House and the Senate to start cutting taxes in a major way, which will then stimulate economic growth, which will result in even more revenue for the United States government. And you see, I don't think, and this is what a lot of the Nobel Prize Keynesian economists I don't think realize is that the overall economic growth does more for government revenue to pay off debt and to pay for these programs that we have in existence than raising taxes does. Because raising taxes is like putting a band-aid on a bullet hole. If you actually grow the economy, grow your tax base, get more people into higher income brackets, you actually end up bringing in more revenue, not just from income taxes, but from corporate taxes. You get more from sales and property taxes at the local level, and people can afford those higher taxes. Well, they're not higher taxes, but they're paying more into the tax system. So again, those tariffs have to be implemented correctly, and I think that Trump and his team are going to be extremely careful about how they implement those tariffs. I know that rhetorically he said, oh, I'm going to put 100% tariff on everything that comes from China, but uh, you know, doing that immediately would crash the economy. It's going to have to be something that happens gradually, but by doing that and bringing industry and bringing jobs back to the United States. You're bringing taxes back to the United States and you're increasing your revenue pool, and it just helps out overall. And I think that some economists need to look more at reality than they do at their political affiliations.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do always point out this stuff. So my brother, when he was in college up in Frostburg, it was an economics class. As the professor said, like, look, I'm a Democrat, but what we need to do is that we need to leave our affiliations at the door and realize that our economic policies do not work. The best ones are the capitalistic and the ones that the conservatives tend to push. So, like, even with that, why do you think that these economic professors that are leaning Democrats still, that still vote for the Democrat policies, why the hell are they doing that?
You have had a takeover of academia by the left. And when I say the left, I'm meaning this in a economic theory
Yeah,
perspective. These are not people that adhere to any sort of capitalist system. They don't believe in capitalist economic theory. They believe in labor theory, everything that comes out of Marxism. And we're starting to see more and more that these economic professors are straight up leftists. They are pushing people towards leftist ideology without fully explaining everything that's gone on with the history of every time leftist economic policy has been put into place. They're caring more about equal outcomes for people than they are equal opportunity, which is provided under a capitalist system. And so and this is kind of the shift we started to see in a lot of European countries around the early 1900s. Once Marxism started to gain traction in Europe, we started to see a lot of these economic professors, because it was a relatively new system at the time, start to be like, well, hey, this is a new system. It's about equality. The United States sort of started this trend with equality, so let's ensure that everybody's equal economically. And it just doesn't work. What 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 labor theory of economy fails to take into account is human nature is naturally competitive. If we were cavemen and there was a pile of acorns sitting out in a field, there would be a competition among the cavemen, seeing who could hold on to the most acorns, just out of sheer human nature. And so we see this movement towards the left in an attempt to try and defy and destroy human nature at its very core, to try and get rid of any sort of competitiveness. And this actually leans over into the social areas as well, because they don't want us competing with each other socially either.
yeah,
And it's this push for equality of outcome from Marxist theory, instead of going with reality that the best system for everyone is a capitalist system, because they want that equal outcome. They fail to realize that capitalism is a rising tide that raises all ships, not just the wealthy. And we see this especially among the people in poverty in the United States. If you live in poverty in the United States, you are living better than a third of the world in their average everyday life. I was talking with someone the other day that the average annual income in the Philippines is $9,500 a year. That's the average annual income in the Philippines. And the Philippines is considered at times to be a more westernized system, based on some of the cities that they have. And we see we see it in real time. And I think that people, especially on the left, get so caught up in their guilt for being successful that they want to make sure that everyone has what they have without necessarily having people compete or work for it. And
Yeah.
it's creating a problem in our education system and in our economy by trying to provide equal outcomes.
Yeah. I think I want to quote a comedian here, Louis C.K. The guy that jerked off in front of a bunch of women. So I think
Yeah.
he said it best in one of his stand-ups where he said, "Look, the average American can get rid of half their shit, and we'd have more than the average Canadian." And, which I think is a fantastic thing to say. Uh,
And I
now,
absolutely agree.
oh, so I want to go back to where you were talking about the Marxists. Uh, So to me, it seems like secularism and Marxism goes hand in hand, and because with Marxism, you're going ahead, you're praising the government basically. Besides, I'm not a religious person. I don't go to church. I just believe in God and Christ, and I leave it at that. Right. So with all the secularist bullshit that's been coming out because of the left with their movements and all do you think this is why we're tending to see the tide to turn with the younger generations. And it's where these young men are now going into church.
I think that's a big part of it, but you gotta, just like everything, secularism isn't a lone, or it isn't a monolith when it
Yeah.
comes to that sort of ideology, because I know a whole lot of secular millennials and secular Gen Z people that are very, very conservative people
Yeah.
because they follow science, they follow numbers, and they want to make sure that we as a society stay on a good footing. But what the left has done is they have taken secularism and they have combined it with just straight up hedonism. And I think that combination of secularism and hedonism, not just in private, but in public hedonism is actually pushing a lot of younger people back into faith and into religion. And in all honesty, I think it's a good thing for society because as human beings, we have we need to know that we're part of something greater than ourselves in order to feel whole. And the left, what they have done over the years in combination with the secularism and the hedonism, is they have deified government. They have made government their god. And in a roundabout way, they have taken their secularism and turned it into a religion that praises government. And that I think is really where the tide is turning as far as religious youth are concerned, because they're seeing these people worship government, worship their handouts, worship that government's going to take care of them and make sure that they have a moderately comfortable life. And there's a lot of people that take a step back and they realize, well, I don't want that. I don't want a moderately acceptable life. I want an exceptional life. I want to be able to do what I want to do. I want to be able to have my wife and my children and my house and my picket fence. I want to live the standard American dream. And the left is trying to take that away from people and say, you'll all live in apartments, you'll all be within walking distance of your Whole Foods that's going to charge you, $7 for a gallon of organic milk and make you just own absolutely nothing and build no sort of economic basis for yourself. And people are rejecting that. People are rejecting the lack of immorality, the bullying that comes out of the left when you don't accept every little kink and say that something's weird that they shouldn't be doing. And so that's pushing a whole lot of people back into sort of this religious state. We're seeing particularly the more traditional denominations of Christianity grow at a much larger rate than even a lot of Protestant denominations. From what I've seen anecdotally, I'm seeing a lot of people join Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. because they feel like it gives them a better connection to their faith and gives them a greater moral standing. So I think that as the left continues to go further left and push more into their hedonism, they're going to see it continue to backfire, not in the sort of growing way that it's happening right now, but especially as Gen Z gets to the age where they start getting married and having children, they're going to see a pushback that is going to shock them.
All right. Thank you very much, political education. So, uh, just want to give you some time. Uh, Floor is yours. Say whatever remarks you want right now. Oh, go ahead.
It's a dangerous thing to do.
Go
It's a
ahead.
very
Look, dude.
dangerous thing to do.
You look.
You
You know
never
the
hand someone in
podcast name. You
politics the
know me.
microphone.
You know me. All right. I don't give a shit. Go ahead if you want to go ahead and throw out some curse words, whatever you want. Go ahead.
Probably not going to do that, but I will say that generally speaking, that an educated populace is what is vital to our republic remaining and functioning. And what we are seeing right now is the Democrats, the left, pushing not just misinformation, but encouraging people to remain politically ignorant. There was an article that came out in the Associated Press about 2.5 months ago where they essentially said in that article, you're too busy to look into these topics. You're too busy to do this research on your own. Let us do it for you, and we'll tell you what to think and we'll tell you how to vote. That is the type of system that the Democrats are pushing for. That is what they want. They don't want you to be independent. They don't want you to make up your own mind. They don't want you to be an individual. They want you to be part of a compliant collective that only seeks to expand the power of government over your everyday life. And I will tell you that I have seen this more and more, especially among younger voters that were millennials, that were Gen Z, especially with how our family structure has broken down in the United States. There were people that have absent parent figures. They may not have grown up the best, but much how the left has taken and replaced government or God with government, they're also trying to replace family with government as well. And you're seeing a lot of younger people, particularly that are just getting started in life, that want government to tell them what to do. They want government to tell them, yes, you can do this. No, you can't do that. Here's your allowance. Here's this. Here's that. What sort of life is that? How is that fulfilling for you as an individual? Can you accomplish anything as an individual? Can you leave a lasting legacy for your children, for future generations, if the government is what you are seeing as a parental figure that is gifting you rights, that is gifting you money, that's gifting you property? That doesn't build you up. That keeps you stagnant. And stagnant water is where disease and crud thrives. So if you are willing to stagnate yourself, if you're willing to stagnate the country, you are inviting further decay into our republic. And by pushing for things like eliminating the electoral college and moving America closer to being a pure democracy is only going to make that stagnation and that rot advance faster and faster. So, we as conservatives, we as Republicans, even if you are in the center and you're someone that pays attention to history and pays attention to economics, we need to be doing our best not just to win elections, but in between elections, we have to be doing our best to educate people. We have to have conversations, even the hard conversations that people don't want to have when they're battling their own ignorance and they're upset that they're ignorant about a topic. We have to be able to have those conversations with people, help them understand the historical context, help them understand why our system is set up the way it is, and ensure that it continues in perpetuity for our children, for our grandchildren, not just for giving conservatives in this country a better place to live. Because conservative policies make life better for everyone, whether or not the left wants to admit it. We have to build a future that is better for everyone, no matter how many ists they throw at us. I guess that's about where I'm at with my little couple minute rant.
All right, all good. All right, so we are getting ready to wrap up here, folks. As always, I'm Anthony Rader, but you can find Political Education on every single platform at Political Education. He's got a Discord server. I'm not really active on there, but I am in it. We talk politics every single day on there.
Shame on
Er,
you. Just
I
messing
like
with
to
you.
just be a fly on the wall there. So,
Oh, I
uh,
know.
yeah. So, what? This is a question that I ask everyone now. Uh, Favorite historical figure? Who is it?
You could ask me any question about politics, and I would be able to answer it right off the bat. Yet you ask me a historical question,
Yep.
and I'm having to read books in my mind to try and figure out who to pick. You know what? Let's go with I mean Thomas Jefferson. I mean, that man was able to absorb and implement knowledge like no one I have ever seen in my entire life. I mean, there are very very smart people out there today, but after viewing his library, seeing all the books that he read, and the absolutely masterful documents that he helped craft at the founding of the first government of its kind in the entire world, I think earns him a very special place in history
Yeah.
and will for hundreds of years to come.
Yep. I mean, people already know mine. I'll tell you. So, in few years ago, they have confirmed that this person was in fact real. But the myths and legends just got caught up in it. King Arthur, he was a real person. He was a nobleman, and apparently,
He
so
was Welsh, if I remember correctly.
yep, yep, he was a Welsh nobleman. It was fantastic. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and read our historical quote for y'all. And then, like I said, join the Discord server, everyone. When we always have a good time on there. We talk politics. We even
Gets
share
a little
memes
heated
sometimes.
sometimes.
It does. It does. It's honestly, it gets so heated sometimes where like even I have to step in. And I think you've seen it too, where like I will
Yes, I
step in
have.
and it's just you're just go like, okay, you just know it's a bad discussion when I have to say something. All right. So our historical quote today is from Martin Luther King. Think the time is always right to do what is right. The time is always right to do what is right. All right. Thank you all, and God bless.
Thank y'all.